My emotions ain't just here for you to play, cause I'm addicted and I want another taste. I know you say we was just kicking out a day, but when I'm with another I cannot replace. See, I be tweaking.
It's a new era of social media. With there being so many fake acts and accounts, I feel like podcasts make it easy for people to see who you truly are.
Jared, thanks for coming through, man. Thanks for doing this podcast with me. Could you tell me a little bit about who you are, how you grew up?
Yeah. So for those of you, obviously my name's Jared. I'm here in Indy. I grew up in Zionsville, which is 30 minutes north of Indianapolis. So in terms of if the city's, downtown, it's just 30 minutes north of downtown.
Nice.
And So I grew up in Zionsville, but I'm from Ohio originally, and I was born in Cleveland, Solon, which is right outside of Cleveland area. And I was a baby when I was adopted. I was an infant. I was a newborn.
Yeah.
And so, when people ask me where I'm from, or
It's kind of hard.
yeah, they say, "Where are you from?" I'm saying, "Well, really, I grew up in Indiana, so." I was 2 years old when I moved here to Indy, so I don't consider myself necessarily from
Indy, but basically
from Ohio. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I consider myself from Zionsville.
Nice.
And so, really, my mom, she couldn't take care of us. My real mom couldn't take care of us.
Yeah.
And so she just considered it a pretty significant thing. It was, she said, okay, there's a mom and a dad, and it kind of starts 16 years before I was born. My mom and dad did foster care for 16 years before they adopted me and my half-brother Ryan. We have the same mom but different dads. So my half-brother Ryan, he is a year older than me, and I was born on February 14th. I was born on February 12th, and then February 14th, Valentine's Day, is when I was taken home from the hospital and brought into, my family. And so my parents, they always kind of helped or, explained to me in the sense of, hey, you're adopted. This is who you are. Your mom couldn't take care of you. Like 3 or 4 years ago, I always knew the details, a lot of them, but I actually read through the medical papers, and my mom had issue with alcoholism.
Yeah.
She had issue with prostitution as well, and so she was trying to, do things to make ends meet at times, even if it had to do with things that were abusive towards your own body. And so that was part of it. And then I think that's who I am. So I was adopted, and then I was very fortunate to be adopted. And that's changed a lot in my life.
How old were you when you were able to fully understand that you were actually adopted? Like, do you remember that time when you actually realized it?
So I'm 28 now.
Yeah.
And man, so I was like 8 or 9 when I was originally told that I was adopted. So I was about 8 or 9, and my mom said, hey, hey Jared, you're adopted. And I was obviously like the same skin tone and the same appearance, right, as my mom and dad. So, life could have went on, and I may have never known.
Yeah.
I might have never thought anything of it. Huh. So when I was 8 or 9, my mom was like, hey, your mom gave you up for adoption because she couldn't take care of you.
But like, how did that conversation even, how do you even spark a conversation like that,
Yeah. To be honest, I can't necessarily remember.
Yeah. But you do remember?
I just remember her telling me, you know, and I remember asking, like, why? But I was 9, right? So I was like, why did that happen? And she's like, because your mom couldn't take care of you. And I think that was her way of saying to a 9-year-old, hey, out of love for you, because she couldn't take care of you, she gave you to us. And then when I was 15, 16, 17, 18, in that range, started to learn a little bit more, started to realize a little bit more about how blessed I was. And, we can get more into that, I guess, if you want. But I started to, I heard, more stories over the years, like from my dad especially. He would say, not just my mom, but my dad would say, hey, Jared, your mom was a prostitute. Your mom had a problem drinking. She had a problem with wealth and just having money. But not wealth in like the sense of having a lot of money, but really having little money.
Just managing anything.
Exactly.
Why do you think your dad told you that because you kept asking? Like, were you very curious, or like, did you keep asking questions after you found out? Or did you kind of just leave it alone? Yeah.
So initially, my parents told me. So it wasn't a conversation that initially started with me being interested in it. Like, it was my mom and dad came to me and they told me. So they actually initiated that conversation, which I would say was very wise of them. And then on the other hand, I started to wonder more about, hey,
right,
what happened here? Why did this happen? And then eventually, now that I'm 28, it directly ties into who I am and what I'm about and what my passions are. Yeah. But obviously, like, I guess one of the biggest like night and day, differences and like big, you could see overarching themes is that I would have grown up with nothing, and I wouldn't have had a dad, and I wouldn't have had parents, especially a mom that would take care of me if I wasn't adopted.
Of course.
And so going to school every day, growing up in Zionsville. And Zionsville is like a very well-to-do area. It's very wealthy. It's like Carmel, very similar. So it's kind of similar in that sense, but like everything appears, is what I'm trying to say. Everything appears well-to-do, right? Everything, what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It all appears that way, right?
Right, it looks that way.
And money is there, and there's fun, and there's stability. Money brings stability, and that's how the world sees it, is that money brings stability, money brings comfort, money Yeah. And so obviously there's positive impacts, or a positive impact that comes from money, but as I started to realize who I was, I started to realize where I came from. And even though I didn't grow up in that environment, on the streets, fending for myself, hanging out with the homies,
right? Yeah.
Just trying every, teenagers, whatever they get their hands on, just trying that,
Yeah.
Trying this, experimenting with different things.
Of course.
Now, I was really blessed. I didn't necessarily go after drugs in high school. I didn't go after alcohol in high school. I kind of was very fortunate in that sense. And I knew too, because of my background growing up, man, I don't think it'd be a good idea.
Yeah, because I was about to ask you, most kids who are born into like, hard time or like stuff like that, usually stuff like that leads to drug use or crimes.
So I'll share, I'm going to call it my testimony. I'll share a little bit of my testimony now. I really struggled with pornography pretty heavily through my teenage years.
How old do you think you were?
I was 12, 13 when I was first exposed.
Yeah.
And it was through high school or through middle school,
of course,
through a friend group. And when I was before 13, I guess Apple wasn't a big thing, and technology wasn't that big, you know. And then around that time in middle school, I remember someone showed me something, and I
fell in love with it.
Yeah, super quick, gravitated towards it, and that was my battle. That was my, what's the word I'm looking for? That was your
vice.
That was my vice, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, through that process of overcoming pornography in my life, and God's been very gracious to me in that, I had to go through a relationship, and when I was in college, that I was deceiving the girl I was dating, and I was actually seeking pleasure
of course,
in other areas, and I was hiding those things. And something else. So I went to a Bible college, and so I knew that God had a plan for my life, but I was also trying to hold on to a lot of what God didn't want of me.
Right.
And so what happened is it was my senior year at college, and Moody Bible Institute is where I attended. And at that time, I had been dating for about a year at that point, and I was I always wanted to get married, always wanted to have a family. My mom and dad obviously were a great example of marriage and loved each other and took care of me and my brother really well. And so, but I had this hidden life of sin, this hidden life on this other side of this image that, going in church every Sunday, trying to help other kids and youth in my life and teach them and help them.
Yeah.
And then through a series of events, my sin was brought to the light, and that lady that I was dating, she found out about that, and that wrecked her and her family and hurt them, because of me. And that was the biggest. That was the biggest thing for me, was that it wasn't at that point, it wasn't anybody else's issue. It was, it was my issue.
You caused the pain.
Yes. And I had to reckon with that. Obviously I had to confront that. And then I went to a rehab, which sounds crazy. And I think in today's society, we may not see pornography or things like that as addictive, but there's studies that have actually been done that the level of dopamine that it releases within your mind can almost be equal to the hit that you actually take from doing the initial exposure of a drug. Yeah.
Oh, shit. It's crazy.
So that repetitive behavior of watching pornography and self-gratification and watching pornography and self-gratification, that actually can lead to a continual behavioral inclination.
Right.
You repeat your repetitive behavior, and we know that that's what addiction is. And so I went off to a rehab for abandoned sexual sin, and I was there for 6 months, and this was in
6 months.
Yeah.
Holy
yeah,
crap.
No phone, no TV, no internet.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Dude, completely separated from the world is crazy. And that was where, to be honest with you, that was where my life really turned around. And
how old were you when
I was 21.
Did you admit yourself, or did your parents recommend it?
Yeah, so I was in my last semester of college. I was on spring break, and I was it's crazy, man. I was talking with that girl I was dating, and just one night, and I'm not going to go into full detail about it, but basically she found out about everything I had been doing.
How did she find out? Without giving too much detail.
So a previous friend that I had contacted her.
Okay.
She found out about it, and then a previous relationship. So essentially, someone who was previously dated, who I had cut things off with, and I was moving on. She found out about it, and then through that, essentially, she basically said, "Hey," and then it was like 10 o'clock at night. We were talking, and she just said, "I got to get off the phone. I can't talk to you anymore." And I had my Bible at my bedside right here, and I was laying on my bed, obviously unfit, talking, and my Bible was closed, and it was right here. This is like the most important piece of my story, by the way, what I'm about to share. So my Bible was right here, and I was laying on my bed, and I got off my bed, and I got on my knees, and I just said, "Lord," I knew immediately. I just knew that this life that I was living of hidden, I knew that there was an issue. I knew, even though the girl didn't say what it was, she didn't say what it was about, I knew that because a couple of weeks, like 3 or 4 weeks prior to that, I had been deeper into that behavior than I ever had before in my life. And I was engaging in deeper levels of sexual encounters and stuff like that. Things like that.
Do you think because of the porn addiction, do you think that made you into a sex addict?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And, this directly ties into my story. So, identity. I think for those of you out there who have dealt with adoption and who've dealt with foster care, anything of that nature, we know things like reactive attachment disorder, which is Yeah, so essentially it's this psychological perspective through tests and through trials and through environmental factors that have been done to children that they deal with rejection in a very deep way because of the fact that they didn't grow up necessarily with their real parent in their life.
Right.
And so, but I wanted to go back for a second. Let me go back. So I opened up my Bible and I opened it up and it said, Luke chapter 12, "Be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. For everything hidden will be disclosed, and everything whispered in the inner ear will be proclaimed from the rooftop." So I was laying on my bed. I got off my bed and I got on my knees and I just literally took my Bible and I just opened it up out of desperation. And I just said and I just said, "God, I'm sorry."
Yeah.
Because I wanted to get married. I wanted to have a family. I was pretty serious about that relationship at the time. And God said, "No, I'm going to discipline you, not punish you. I'm going to discipline you because I love you." And so then that was when I was 21 or 20. And that's when I would say that I had an encounter with God. And obviously, if someone were to say, "How do you know he's real?" I would just say that to them. I'd be like, "Well, changing my life." And I've never walked in sexual addiction ever since then. I haven't been the same. My life has changed. I've relapsed at times, don't get me wrong, but I haven't went to, my life's in the light now. I have accountability in my life. I have all those things.
Yeah.
So reactive attachment disorder is, long story short, is essentially what happens to any child who's taken away. That reactive attachment is when you're actually taken away, that separation that takes place between you and your parent, or your identity, whoever is your real family. And so that separation, it's genetic.
Yeah.
It goes to the core of who we are.
Do you think you got that from finding out that you were adopted?
Mm-hmm. So, I don't think I got that from finding out that I was adopted. I think I got that from wrestling through all that comes with that.
Okay. What do you think would have happened if your parents decided, "Hey, you know what, let's not tell him"? What if he never finds out? How do you think life would have been then? Do you think it would have been worse?
So let me break it down. I think it would be virtually impossible because my brother is half black. So we have the same mom, different dads, and my brother, he his dad was Mexican and his mom was white. Our mom's white, and my real dad was white, whoever that was, because I'm obviously, and then my brother was half black, so his dad was Mexican. Okay. And so his color, you know, I mean, it's like he has like curly hair and it's like dark brown, and I'm like, you know, brown hair.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it's like totally different genetics.
Yeah.
You know, and like if we were just like, yeah, it just wouldn't have worked. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course.
And I personally, I believe that you can't hide a lie forever. I mean, you can hide a lie for a period of time.
Of course.
But you can't hide it it's eventually, you know, and you know, it comes out.
Yeah, and so this is all like you've spoken openly, like with your wife that you're married now with, like your whole close family all know about this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How hard was it to like finally let the other second life come out? Was it difficult or was it necessary?
So my parents are believers, my mom and my dad. They love the Lord.
Yeah.
So growing up, I do feel like this will be really encouraging for someone.
Of course.
So, you know, growing up, I really started to realize that I started to realize that was, as I've grown up, I want to say growing up in like the sense of just growing in who I am.
Okay.
You know, not like physically growing, like going and getting taller.
Growing up mentally.
Yeah. So like understanding who I am, that realization came through me realizing that like my parents loved me. And so actually that night that I told you when I read my Bible, opened up my Bible, I went downstairs and I went into my parents' bedroom and I looked at my dad and I said, "Dad, can I talk to you?"
Oh, wow.
And he said, "Yes." And mom was in the bed and it was like, they were just getting ready. Mom was still reading her book, you know, sitting up in bed like how she always would do. Mm-hmm. And then, so my dad and me, he came out of the room and we went over to another room in the house, and he said, "What's going on?" And I told him, "This is what I've been doing. This is you know, the behavior I've been doing, and this is what's been going on." And
was it the first time you fully explained it to him?
No. So my parents knew that I dealt with that issue of pornography when I was in high school and stuff, because there was a couple times when they would see it on my phone or they would, you know, see it or whatever.
Yeah.
So he wasn't blindsided by it.
Okay.
But the certain behaviors that were with that, he was pretty taken back by. And so he said, "Jared, well, the only thing is like," he basically told me, he said, "We need to get you help."
Yeah.
And so what he said, he was like, "We need to get you help."
Yeah.
And he didn't cry. I don't know. I mean, my dad's pretty strong, you know. So,
yeah.
But he didn't cry, but even though he could have. But my mom, she was in the other room, and when I came back in, she was like, "Jared, you know, what the hell? You know, like,
yeah.
Like, why are you doing this?" And, you know, and she already knew, because, like, that was, like, the biggest struggle that I had. So, you know, so then, like, the next morning, I woke up, and it was like 10 o'clock. I slept in for a little bit. Woke up, came downstairs, and we got on the computer and started looking at different places. And the organization was called Pure Life Ministries.
I think I've heard about it before.
Yeah, it's in Kentucky.
Were you scared or were you excited?
I was really broken at that point.
Yeah.
So I didn't care anymore.
You were just whatever helps me, just take me there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, I was just like, okay.
Anything that'll
like anything that'll be a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
I wasn't this is another part for you guys out there, but like I had been so religious, bro, like, man, like, you know, going to church, raising my hands, praising God, you know, like, man, like, you know, could like pray, you know, knew about the Bible from Bible college, dotted all the I's and had all the T's crossed, you know what I'm saying? But like I was an intern at a church at the time, and all that got taken away from me. All of that, I got stepped down from a lot of things.
That must have been tough.
Yeah, I stopped going to church for a season. I did. I stopped going to church for about 3 months. Just in Sunday mornings, I would stay in my dorm room and I would listen to YouTube, your worship on YouTube and stuff. And I would just be alone. I kind of, for a season, isolated myself, stepped away, and really just tried to work out myself, honestly.
Sometimes I feel like that's what you need.
Yeah.
To stay away from everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say that was like a human response, probably, to the shame and the guilt of my behavior and me trying to change, and not trying to change I don't want to say I changed myself, but, you know, trying to become a different person. And it was really shameful because, you know, when you're, and I think that's the thing with religion. Obviously I would say that I'm a Christian, but religion upholds an image. And if you don't uphold that image,
yeah,
people would say that that's a problem, that are trying to uphold that image. That's the danger.
Yeah.
Is that we're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Anybody who portrays themselves to be perfect is lying.
Of course.
You know, and I think obviously there's different levels of evil. Like, you know, a person who's doing, you know, trafficking or something, or murdering people, that's not the same as, like, you know, lying to someone through a lie. But my point is none of us are perfect. Some of us lie, some of us steal, some of us cheat, some of us, you know, have temptation in our life.
Of course.
You know, and I think that's the problem with the church a lot of ways, is that it's all about, you know,
being perfect, or trying to be perfect.
Upholding this image, and really it should be about actually loving your brother, and taking care of those around you and caring for them. Yeah, no matter what. No matter what, and understanding that if a person professes to be a Christian and they want to change, that's the only requirement. It doesn't have to be, okay, like in the next 2 months, you need to be completely. Yeah, you need to stop doing drugs within 1 week or something like that. Yeah, exactly. Like all these conditions.
Yeah. You said you studied about marriage.
Mm-hmm.
How does that? What exactly do you learn from studying for marriage?
Yeah, I would say. The biggest. Okay, so personally, my biggest need was companionship. So I just knew that I always wanted a best friend, and I always wanted a partner, and I always wanted someone who shared the same values and convictions that I had.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to building a strong marriage, your values and your convictions are everything. You know, I mean, if we think about marriage in the traditional sense, that two people come together to get married, and they both don't have any children in their life, and they're both young, and they're both looking forward to the future to do parenting. If you have the same convictions and the same values, that really helps with parenting, you know. Makes it easier to parent, makes it easier, because if your spouse doesn't have the same values as you do, then you're going to discipline your child in two different ways.
Of course.
And that can cause conflict and confusion within the home. You know, that's one piece, is the convictions and values, like what you believe in, what you follow, whether you follow Jesus or you follow Islam, or you know, people who have that common belief and convictions, that underlines, you know, the decisions that they make.